Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered, why don't I feel happy, even though I've done everything right? Maybe you raised a family, worked hard, stayed loyal in your relationships, and tried your best to be kind and helpful to everyone around you. And yet, there's this feeling inside that something's missing. It's not that you're sad all the time, but contentment, real peace, still feels just out of reach. You're not alone. Many women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s feel the same way. They've lived through so many seasons of life, raising kids, losing loved ones, navigating health scares, dealing with disappointments, and through it all, they kept going. But at some point, they start to ask, when is it my turn to feel fulfilled? So today, we're going to gently explore a question that's been sitting quietly in the hearts of many older women. Why does happiness still feel so hard to hold on to, even now? This conversation might feel personal, and maybe even a little uncomfortable in parts. But I promise, it's not here to blame anyone. It's here to help you understand yourself better, reconnect with your own story, and maybe find a path to peace that you didn't see before. Let's start by going back, way back, to where so many of our emotional patterns are first formed: childhood. You see, many women grew up in homes where love was complicated. Maybe you had a father who was distant, angry, or simply not around. Or maybe your mother was always overwhelmed, never satisfied, and seemed to carry a weight of frustration wherever she went. In those early years, children don't just listen to what adults say. They absorb the emotional environment like little sponges. If love came with conditions, like be quiet and good or I'll ignore you, or make me proud or I'll be disappointed, that leaves a mark. And when that pattern repeats again and again, a young girl can grow into a woman who still believes, deep down, that she has to earn love, that she has to do more, give more, be more, just to feel worthy of happiness. Even decades later, these childhood patterns keep playing in the background. You might find yourself giving endlessly to others even when you're tired. You might feel guilty when you rest, or uncomfortable when someone wants to take care of you. You might struggle to ask for help, or downplay your own needs to keep the peace. These aren't random habits. They're old survival skills, but they come at a cost. Another thing that shapes our happiness is something we don't often talk about, especially among women: the silent pressure of expectations. From the time we were little, we were shown stories, on TV, in books, in magazines, of what life should look like. The happy family, the romantic husband, the perfect home, the beautiful body, the smiling grandchildren, the constant sense of meaning and connection. But real life, it doesn't always follow that script. Maybe your marriage was harder than you expected. Maybe your children drifted away. Maybe you never found the kind of deep friendship you hoped for. Or maybe you got all those things and still felt empty inside. That gap between what we thought life would be and what it actually is can quietly wear away at happiness. And for many older women, it creates a deep, painful question: did I do something wrong? Let me tell you, just because your life didn't match the fantasy doesn't mean you failed. It means you lived a real human life, one with ups and downs, love and loss, joy and disappointment. That's not failure, that's courage. But when no one teaches us how to let go of unrealistic expectations, we end up chasing something that doesn't exist. And that chase, year after year, leaves us tired, resentful, and unsure why we feel so dissatisfied. Now let's talk about something that's made this even harder in the past 15 years: the influence of social media. Even if you're not scrolling through Instagram or Facebook every day, you're still surrounded by a culture that celebrates perfection. Everywhere you look, there are pictures of women your age traveling the world, dancing on cruises, surrounded by smiling grandchildren, or holding hands with their doting husband at sunset. And it can make you pause and think, why doesn't my life look like that? But here's the truth: those photos are curated, they're highlights. They're the best 5 seconds of someone's month polished up to look like an entire lifestyle. What you're comparing your real, raw, complex life to is an edited illusion. And yet, even when we know this, it still gets to us. That little voice creeps in. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I made the wrong choices. Maybe I missed my chance. This comparison trap doesn't just steal joy. It feeds an inner story that we're falling behind, that we're not measuring up, that our life isn't as meaningful as someone else's. But here's something no one tells you. The most peaceful women are rarely the ones with the best photos. They're the ones who've made peace with their story just as it is. Still, there's one more layer we need to talk about. And this one's harder to admit, because it lives in the quiet corners of the mind. It's what psychologists call the devaluation mechanism. It means that sometimes, when we finally get what we thought we wanted, we stop appreciating it. Maybe you longed for your husband's attention, and now that he's retired and home all the time, you just feel irritated. Maybe you dreamed of freedom in your later years, but now that the kids are grown and gone, you feel lonely. Maybe you finally moved into the house you waited for, and now all you see are the things that need fixing. It's not because you're ungrateful, it's because the brain naturally adapts to what it already has. Once something becomes familiar, it loses its shine. And without intentional effort to pause, reflect, and practice gratitude, we stop feeling the joy that's right in front of us. So, what can we do? How do we gently step out of these patterns and reconnect with something deeper? It starts with awareness. Awareness that your dissatisfaction may not mean your life is broken. It may mean old emotional patterns are still running the show. Awareness that not everything you see around you is real. Awareness that happiness doesn't always come from getting more. It often comes from wanting less. Let that awareness settle in. And as we continue, we'll open the door a little wider into understanding why even well-lived lives can still feel hollow sometimes, and what you can do to find joy again, in your own way, at your own pace. Sometimes we carry stories inside us that we've never said out loud. Stories about choices we made, opportunities we passed up, people we trusted, and people who hurt us. And when we're young, we tell ourselves we'll have time to sort all that out later. But later eventually becomes now. And those stories are still sitting there, unspoken, unresolved, shaping how we feel every single day. Many women in their 60s or 70s find themselves at a strange crossroads. They've reached an age where people expect them to feel wise, grateful, settled, and yet deep inside, they feel restless, regretful, sometimes even angry, without always knowing why. This is where internal conflict starts to bubble up. On the outside, everything looks fine. Maybe you've got your routine, your home, your family, but on the inside, there's a tug of war between the life you imagined and the one you actually have. And without even realizing it, many women start sabotaging their own peace because they've never made peace with their own past. Here's what that might look like. You tell yourself you want closeness, but then you pull away when someone gets too emotionally near. You crave stability, but you create chaos out of habit. You say you want to feel seen and heard, but when someone truly listens, you don't know what to say. That's not failure, that's just old programming. We all develop emotional reflexes when we're young, ways of protecting ourselves from pain. Some women learn to hide their needs. Others learn to criticize first, so they won't get criticized. Some learn to smile through disappointment. And over time, those reflexes become part of who we are. But the truth is, they were never us. They were just defense systems. And after a while, those systems can keep out the very things we say we want. Love, connection, calm, joy. It can feel like happiness is always one step ahead of you, and every time you reach for it, something inside holds you back. That's the moment to pause and ask, is the problem out there? Or is it something I need to look at in here? Now, let's talk about something else that quietly adds pressure: the ticking of the clock. Time has a way of sneaking up on us. One day you're 30, thinking you've got decades ahead to chase dreams, change paths, or find the kind of love you always hoped for. Then suddenly you're 60, and that future feels shorter than you thought it would be. There's a sense of urgency, sometimes even panic. That comes with age, it sounds like. I thought I'd be happier by now. I thought I'd have grandkids. I thought I'd feel more confident. I thought I'd feel more loved. That pressure creates a kind of grief, not always loud or obvious, but quiet and heavy. Grief for the life you didn't live, for the parts of yourself you buried, for the dreams that didn't come true. But no one teaches us how to grieve what we almost had. So instead, we turn it inward. We criticize ourselves. We blame our past choices. We look at our partners and wonder if they're the reason we feel stuck. And the more we try to find someone or something to explain our unhappiness, the more lost we feel. Because the truth is, the sadness isn't just about what we don't have. It's about how we learned to measure our lives in the first place. Which brings us to one of the most important patterns that can quietly destroy joy: the "I deserve more" mindset. Now let me be clear. There is nothing wrong with knowing your worth. Every woman deserves respect, kindness, and safety. But sometimes the message of "you deserve more" gets tangled with unrealistic entitlement. We start expecting our partner to act like the leading man in a movie: charming, romantic, emotionally tuned in, financially secure, and never tired. We expect our children to call more, visit more, say thank you more. We expect the world to notice us, reward us, appreciate all the sacrifices we've made over the years. And when those things don't happen, the disappointment cuts deep. The problem is, the more we focus on what we don't have, the harder it becomes to see what we do have. We start resenting people instead of connecting with them. We start criticizing instead of appreciating. We stop being curious about others and start building quiet walls. And here's the twist: the more we act like people owe us, the less they want to give. That mindset breaks down mutual respect. And without respect, love struggles to survive. This is especially true in marriages that have lasted decades. You might still care about each other, but if respect has eroded, if one person constantly feels judged or unappreciated, emotional distance sets in. It doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from exhaustion, from both people feeling like they're giving and not getting, from years of small misunderstandings piling up until they feel like mountains. So what do we do with all of this? First, we get honest. Not with judgment, but with compassion. We admit that, yes, some of our dissatisfaction might come from old wounds, from expectations that were never realistic, from ways we've been measuring happiness that no longer make sense. And then we shift the focus. Instead of constantly asking, "Why isn't this enough?" we begin asking, "What have I already survived? What beauty is still in front of me? What kind of peace could I make with myself if I stopped trying to chase something outside of me?" That shift, subtle but powerful, is where real healing begins. Because the truth is, you are not broken. You are not too late. You are not too old. You are simply someone who has carried a lot, seen a lot, and felt deeply. And now, maybe it's time to set some of that weight down. There's a kind of freedom that comes with age, if we're willing to take it. A freedom to stop performing, to stop apologizing for our needs, to stop chasing someone else's version of the perfect life. But here's the challenge. Many women have spent decades performing roles that didn't feel like them. The loving wife, the tireless mom, the selfless caregiver, the polite daughter, the understanding friend. And over time, we get so used to wearing masks that we forget what our own face looks like underneath. Sometimes that mask says, "I'm fine," but behind it there's loneliness. Sometimes it says, "I'm strong," but behind it there's exhaustion. Sometimes it says, "I've moved on," but behind it there's regret that was never spoken out loud. The older we get, the more tempting it is to keep the mask on, to stay quiet, to pretend everything's okay. But pretending is tiring, and in the end, it becomes its own kind of prison. If you've ever felt like you're living a version of your life that doesn't match who you really are, you're not alone. And sometimes, this disconnect between our outer life and inner truth creates a deep, persistent unhappiness. We may not even have the words for it. We just feel it in our body. Tension in the shoulders, tightness in the chest, a heaviness that follows us from room to room. This is where real self-sabotage begins. It's not about dramatic choices or obvious mistakes. It's quieter than that. It's the little ways we turn down joy before it fully arrives. The small moments when we push love away because we don't trust it will last. The way we dismiss compliments, reject help, or avoid people who see the real us, because that kind of closeness feels vulnerable. When we carry deep emotional pain, especially pain that's been buried for years, we sometimes become the very ones standing in the way of our own healing. Not because we're weak, but because we're scared. Scared to feel too much, scared to be disappointed again, scared that if we really stop and look inward, we might discover a sadness we've tried to outrun for decades. But here's the truth, that brings light into all that fear. You don't have to fix your entire past to move forward. You only need to meet yourself where you are, gently, honestly, without judgment. There's one more piece we need to talk about. It's something many women feel, but few say out loud. The grief of missed milestones. We were told growing up that there was a timeline for everything. Get married by this age, have children by that age, build a career, retire comfortably, travel, enjoy the grandchildren. But life doesn't always follow that schedule. Maybe you never had children, maybe you never found the right partner, maybe you did all the right things, and it still didn't turn out the way you hoped. And now, looking back, there's this quiet ache. Not because your life wasn't meaningful, but because certain dreams were never lived out. And it feels too late to change that. That's a deep kind of sorrow, and it deserves to be named. You don't have to hide your grief, just because you made peace with your choices. You can love your life and mourn what didn't happen. That's not weakness. That's emotional honesty. And it's a sign of growth, not failure. So many women feel like they're running out of time, that if they haven't found happiness yet, maybe it's not meant for them. But I want you to hear this. Happiness at 60 or 70 or 80 is not just possible, it's real. It doesn't always come in the form of fireworks or big celebrations. Sometimes it's the quiet comfort of waking up without anxiety, the peaceful moment of sipping tea with a friend who listens without judgment, the joy of reading a book that speaks directly to your heart, the pride in finally speaking your truth, even if your voice trembles. Happiness isn't always about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about seeing what's still beautiful. And yes, it takes courage to shift your mindset from "what did I lose?" to "what can I still create?" From "what's missing?" to "what's already here?" From "I'm too late" to "I still have time." Because you do. There is still time to explore new parts of yourself, to say yes to things that scare you, to reconnect with people you love, or let go of relationships that no longer serve you, to try something new, even if it's small. And most of all, there is still time to rewrite the story you tell yourself. Not the story of what you should have done, but the story of the woman you still are. Resilient, wise, tender, capable of deep joy. If you've spent years trying to make everyone else happy, maybe now is the moment to turn that kindness inward, to offer yourself the understanding, support, and encouragement you've given so freely to others. Because at this stage of life, happiness isn't about perfection, it's about peace. And peace begins the moment you stop fighting with your own story. So if you're still here with me, listening, reflecting, I want to thank you. That means you're ready. Ready to soften, not harden. To open, not close. To live, not just survive. You deserve that. Truly. If this video spoke to your heart, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what part of this felt real to you? What has your journey been like? You never know who you might help by sharing. And if you haven't yet, please give this video a like and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. We're building a space here where older adults, especially women, can feel seen, supported, and inspired to live fully, no matter their age. Here's to you. Here's to healing. Here's to living your best life at any age. Because you're not done yet. You're just getting started.